So the question here is, how should I compare a testamentary trust and an investment bond when it comes to estate planning? So lots of jargon to unpack there. So estate planning is the process of planning for a few things. So certainly it deals with the obvious, what happens to my assets when I die, and that's usually dealt with by your will. But it also deals with what happens while I'm still alive and can't make decisions. And that's where things like a enduring power of attorney comes into play. So a testamentary trust is, as the name suggests, a trust which springs into existence as part of a last will and testament, hence testamentary. And so that's a way of leaving your assets behind in a way that they can benefit your heirs and beneficiaries without the assets necessarily passing to them individually. This has a number of benefits. The two big ones are tax. So if your heirs are minor children, so it's quite often that if a parent dies leaving orphans behind, the money that is left, or the assets left in the will to provide for their upbringing, education and care until they become adults is going to be, if it's left directly to them, it will be taxed at minor. So children don't get normal tax-free allowance, so there's a penalty tax for investment earnings for children. If you leave it to your surviving partner, they may very well be a high rate taxpayer, so they're going to pay tax on their share at a potentially higher rate. And if they become bankrupt or marry again, there's a risk that those assets may not survive to continue helping your children grow to be adults. So it's possible to leave them in a trust where your executor or the trustee can distribute that money each year to the children to help with their education, food, clothing, living expenses, and also, where appropriate, to your surviving partner. Those assets sit separately. The testamentary trust will a distribution from a testamentary trust to a child will attract adult tax rates, and so less tax will be paid, and it protects those assets from the bankruptcy of your surviving partner, and potentially also protects them from being divvied up in a subsequent divorce if your partner gets remarried. So for all of those reasons where you're leaving minor children and a spouse, a surviving spouse, it can often make a lot of sense. There is a cost in this, so there is a trade-off between ongoing administrative costs and the tax saving. But if you're talking about a material amount of money, it's certainly something you should be considering. An investment bond, on the other hand, is a special investment structure usually issued by an insurance company or friendly society, where rather than forming part of your personal assets, it sits in the books of the insurance company and is taxed as if it were an insurance company. So that means it will pay tax at 30% on all income, whether capital gains or income, which for a top rate taxpayer, where you're going to be paying 47% on income and an effective 23.5% on capital gains, that can create a net benefit. For lower rate taxpayers, it makes a lot less sense from a pure tax planning perspective. It can be useful to help qualify for family tax benefit. If you've got a stay-at-home spouse, for example, you might still be better off having the money in an investment bond. It's out of sight, out of mind, doesn't turn up in its tax return, doesn't affect your entitlement to many Centrelink benefits and, of course, the family tax benefit. It can also provide benefits for retirees where depending on who owns the bond, you won't get asset tested for the age pension, so it may enable you to get a higher age pension and still help you provide assets to your often grandchildren, where you might be paying for their education. And so the interworkings of the gifting provisions and how the assets are tested for age pension, it can provide a very useful tool there. It can also provide for asset protection where a investment bond might not be available to your creditors. So some fairly complex structuring in there. These things get a lot of flack because they're not necessarily tax efficient for low tax rate payers, partly because they don't get that capital gains tax discount internally. They're tax free to you, but that's because they paid tax at 30%. But the real benefits are not, for most people, are not purely around tax planning. They're around asset protection, estate planning, and age pension and other Centrelink benefits. So some fairly complex maths there, and they are a long-term, 10-year plus investment. So get some professional advice.